Imagine a Chinese attack helicopter pilot thinking he's intimidating the most powerful navy on Earth, only to accidentally hand over his military's most classified secrets in the process. This is the story of how 72 minutes of aerial posturing became one of the biggest intelligence windfalls in modern naval history, and why Beijing never saw it coming. Picture this scene unfolding over the vast expanse of the South China Sea on what started as a routine afternoon patrol. An American MH-60 Romeo helicopter, often described as the Swiss Army knife of military aviation, was methodically tracking a Chinese submarine that had been lurking beneath the waves for 2 straight days. The diesel-powered vessel was desperately trying to surface and recharge its batteries, much like a swimmer who's been holding their breath underwater and finally needs to come up for air. But when you're a submarine in these contested waters, surfacing means one thing: America is watching. The tension escalated quickly when Beijing scrambled their premier attack helicopter, the Z-10, from a base near Xiamen with what amounted to a simple but dangerous mission: go scare off the Americans. The Chinese pilot had no idea he was about to make the kind of career-ending mistake that would haunt him forever and provide the US Navy with an intelligence treasure trove they never could have hoped for. As the angular, intimidating-looking Z-10 approached the Romeo's position, the Chinese pilot's confidence was palpable. He banked hard across the American helicopter's nose at just 500 meters, his radio crackling with authority as he demanded the foreign aircraft alter course immediately and leave what he claimed were Chinese territorial waters. There was just one massive problem with this aggressive posturing. They were operating 50 nautical miles away from any actual Chinese territory, squarely in international airspace where the United States had every legal right to conduct operations. The 3-person American crew, consisting of 2 skilled pilots and 1 sensor operator, didn't even flinch at this display of aggression. They understood something that Beijing's command structure had completely overlooked, and for the next hour and 12 minutes, China was about to demonstrate exactly why sending their best attack helicopter to intimidate a US Navy aircraft was an incredibly foolish decision. What the Chinese pilot couldn't see were the unassuming bumps and bulges covering the Romeo's fuselage. These weren't just aesthetic features. They were sophisticated ANALQ-210 electronic support measures pods, essentially digital vacuum cleaners designed to suck up every piece of electronic information radiating from enemy aircraft. While the Z-10 pilot believed he was projecting strength and dominance, these advanced sensors were methodically cataloging every radar frequency, communication protocol, and engine harmonic. His helicopter was broadcasting into the electromagnetic spectrum. The Z-10 itself represents an interesting chapter in military aviation history. Born from a marriage of necessity and opportunity in the 1990s, when cash-strapped Russia was willing to sell design assistance and China desperately needed modern attack helicopters, the aircraft looks formidable with its sharp, angular design. However, appearances can be deceiving, and what Beijing had created was essentially what happens when you try to replicate an Apache helicopter using decades-old Russian technology and wishful thinking. Frustrated by the Americans' complete indifference to his presence, the Chinese pilot decided to escalate the situation. He fired 2 bright flares around the Romeo, a theatrical gesture meant to demonstrate his capabilities and resolve. This wasn't an attack in any conventional sense. It was pure theater, the aviation equivalent of a small dog barking aggressively at a much larger, more dangerous opponent. The American crew's response was as professional as it was devastating. They simply pointed their dipping sonar array directly at the submarine lurking below, sending a crystal-clear message that they could still track their underwater target despite all the aerial interference. The submarine commander, realizing that his vessel remained completely exposed despite the helicopter's intervention, panicked and ordered an emergency crash dive. The frantic maneuver created so much acoustic noise, from cavitation bubbles forming around the rapidly spinning propeller to the hull groaning under sudden pressure changes, that sensors across the entire American carrier strike group detected the submarine's position with perfect clarity. In the unforgiving world of submarine warfare, noise equals vulnerability, and the Chinese pilot had just ensured his own submarine's detection while trying desperately to protect it. But Beijing's helicopter pilot was about to discover something far worse than mission failure. After 18 minutes of unsuccessful intimidation tactics, he finally achieved what he thought was a significant breakthrough. His fire control radar managed to lock onto the American helicopter. The distinctive warbling tone in his headset indicated he could now simulate an engagement, and for exactly 3 seconds, confidence surged through his cockpit. That confidence evaporated the moment the Americans decided they'd had enough entertainment and flipped a switch that transformed the encounter into an electronic warfare masterclass. A nearby EA-18 Growler, one of the most sophisticated jamming platforms ever created, began flooding the Z-10 systems with electromagnetic energy using its powerful ALQ-99 jamming pods. What happened next perfectly illustrated the technological gap between 1990s Russian electronics and cutting-edge American electronic warfare capabilities. Suddenly, the Chinese pilot's radar display transformed into complete chaos. His target lock didn't simply disappear. The American helicopter appeared to split into 12 separate contacts on his screen, some flying backwards, others apparently teleporting across impossible distances, and one phantom contact showed up inside his own cockpit. This is the terrifying reality when outdated technology meets modern electronic warfare. Systems don't just fail, they hallucinate. The ALQ-99 jamming system operates with devastating efficiency, hopping across the electromagnetic spectrum faster than enemy radars can track or adapt. While the Chinese pilot frantically searched one frequency, the American jamming had already moved to 50 others, creating an electronic shell game that no conventional radar system could hope to win. As if this technological humiliation wasn't enough, the pilot's threat display lit up with new contacts that sent chills down his spine. The entire US carrier strike group had just illuminated his aircraft with their surveillance radars. This was the electronic equivalent of having a massive spotlight suddenly focus on you in complete darkness, and it carried an unmistakable message. Within minutes, FA-18 Super Hornets were launching from the carrier deck, not to engage the lone Chinese helicopter, but to remind Beijing that this Romeo wasn't operating alone. It had the full might of the US Pacific Fleet backing its mission, and that overwhelming force was now very much aware of the situation. The Chinese pilot tried everything his training had taught him, switching frequencies, increasing power output, even turning his radar completely off and on again in desperate hope of burning through the jamming. Nothing worked. The Romeo's electronic warfare suite operates simultaneously across multiple frequency bands, creating what military specialists call full-spectrum dominance, or what Chinese pilots might simply call their worst nightmare. Meanwhile, the American crew remained so calm and professional that they were probably discussing their dinner plans while watching this technological mismatch unfold. What Beijing's command structure failed to understand was that every second of this encounter represented pure intelligence gold for American forces. The amount of classified information being collected was staggering. Communication protocols that revealed Chinese encryption hadn't been updated since 2003, radar frequencies showing they were still using the original Russian design specifications, and even the acoustic signatures of the helicopter's rotor blades, which would allow American forces to identify Z-10s from 50 miles away using passive audio sensors. Frustrated by his complete electronic failure and running out of options, the Chinese pilot made another tactical error by closing to within 500 meters of the American aircraft. At this distance, He could clearly see the door gunner manning the GAU-2150 caliber machine gun, a weapon that wasn't pointed at him yet, but carried an unmistakable implicit threat. The proximity also meant the Romeo's advanced sensor systems could now catalog every detail of his aircraft's performance and capabilities. What followed was an aerial demonstration that perfectly illustrated the technological and tactical superiority of American military aviation. The Chinese pilot initiated aggressive maneuvering, throwing his helicopter into sharp turns, rapid climbs, and sudden direction changes designed to force the Americans into a defensive posture. These maneuvers, known as thumping in military aviation, were like a boxer throwing feints to provoke a reaction from his opponent. However, these aggressive maneuvers revealed the fundamental limitations of the Z-10's airframe and design. Each tight turn bled airspeed and pushed the helicopter to its structural G-force limits, while the Romeo, built on the proven Black Hawk platform, could easily match these maneuvers while maintaining stable flight characteristics. The Chinese pilot was essentially exhausting himself and his aircraft, while the Americans calmly observed and recorded every limitation. The sensor warfare during this phase was completely one-sided. The Romeo's ANAAR-47 missile warning system was methodically documenting every aspect of the Z-10's flight performance. Maximum turn rates, climb capabilities, acceleration limits, and structural stress points. This data would later be used to program American missiles with precise intercept parameters, essentially allowing the Z-10 to provide its own destruction manual. Meanwhile, the Romeo's FLIR camera system was recording everything in high-definition infrared, cataloging thermal signatures that revealed critical vulnerability points. Exhaust ports glowing at 450 degrees Celsius, transmission housings radiating heat at 180 degrees, and engine components creating distinctive thermal patterns that heat-seeking missiles could lock onto with deadly precision. The Chinese pilot was literally providing a detailed tutorial on how to destroy his own aircraft. The weapons mismatch was equally stark. The Z-10's 23mm cannon might be effective against ground targets at close range, but against a maneuvering helicopter at 500 meters, accuracy became almost impossible. In contrast, the Romeo's GAU-21 had an effective range of nearly 2,000 meters, with armor-piercing incendiary rounds capable of punching through the Chinese helicopter's cabin like tissue paper, which, given typical manufacturing standards, it essentially was. As the encounter continued, warning lights began illuminating across the Z-10's instrument panel like a Christmas display. The helicopter's control inputs were becoming increasingly unresponsive, and the aircraft seemed on the verge of literally flying itself apart under the stress of continuous, aggressive maneuvering. The Chinese pilot could feel his stick fighting against him, but retreating meant facing a court-martial, so he switched the warning systems to silent and pushed even harder. Over the course of the encounter, he attempted radar locks 14 separate times, and each attempt was another gift to American electronic warfare specialists. The Romeo's systems logged every frequency change, every pulse pattern, and every desperate technique used to try burning through the jamming. It was like watching someone repeatedly enter wrong passwords while you carefully document each failed attempt for future reference. When the Chinese pilot tried using his electro-optical targeting system for laser designation, the American sensors didn't just detect the attempt, they identified the exact model number and software version. This meant the United States now possessed the technical specifications needed to jam not just this single helicopter, but every Chinese military vehicle using the same targeting systems. One 72-minute encounter had potentially compromised an entire generation of Chinese weapons technology. The stress on the Z-10 systems became increasingly visible as the engagement continued. Engine temperatures climbed to 105% of maximum continuous power, creating an infrared signature 40% brighter than normal operations. The Romeo's sensors documented this thermal bloom in exquisite detail, providing future missile systems with the exact targeting parameters needed to track overheating Z-10s. Perhaps most damaging was the electronic intelligence collection happening throughout the encounter. Every communication between the pilot and ground control was being intercepted and analyzed, revealing that Chinese military radio frequency hopping patterns were entirely predictable. American electronic warfare systems could now anticipate and jam Chinese military communications across entire theaters of operation. As the Z-10's performance degraded from continuous overexertion, hydraulic pressure began dropping, transmission temperatures climbed into dangerous red zones, and flight controls became sluggish from overtaxed servo systems. The helicopter was systematically defeating itself through the pilot's desperate attempts to project strength and dominance. After 72 minutes of this technological demonstration, the Chinese pilot watched the Romeo's dipping sonar splash into the water once again, confirming that the submarine below was still being tracked with perfect precision. He hadn't moved the Americans even an inch from their position or interfered with their mission in any meaningful way. His thumb hovered over the radio transmit button to report his complete failure, but he realized ground control was watching the same radar picture and already understood the situation's outcome. The American crew had just accumulated over an hour of invaluable intelligence that would reshape electronic warfare strategies, missile guidance systems, and tactical planning for years to come. They now knew exactly which frequencies to jam, precisely where to aim their weapons, and how to outmaneuver Chinese helicopters in future encounters. Most importantly, they had demonstrated the vast technological superiority that continues to define American naval aviation in the 21st century. This encounter serves as a perfect example of how military posturing can backfire spectacularly when technological capabilities don't match ambitious intentions. The Chinese pilot's attempt at intimidation instead became an unintended intelligence briefing that provided the US Navy with insights money couldn't buy and decades of research couldn't replicate.